That Baka Blue Raspberry is looking a little sussy. I'm sorry, I fucking had to. Okay, looky here. This is not going to be, I'm filming this on a different day, not the day that I'm filming the rest of the video, but I'm outside of an Indigo Chapter's place, closer to the western end of the Orleans district, and I don't know if these are elderberries or actual blueberries. Maybe they're, what is it, humbleberries? I don't know. I think it's either called humbleberries, it's not called jumbleberries, but they look either like blueberries or elderberries. Again, just growing outside of this building in the middle of a suburban area of the Orleans district of Ottawa. Closer to the West End. Not in it. So still advised, don't go down there for fruit picking. But for fuck's sake, I'm kind of pissed off. A, I'm going to find out what these are, and if I can pick them, if they're safe to eat. And if they are safe to eat, I'm going to be really pissed that I didn't know this was here for the night that I actually went, the day that I went pick. This is the second night that I have walked down from this exact road on the complete opposite end of the district, or almost the opposite end. Now this is the eastern end from the central area of Orleans. I walked down like 4 different subdivisions trying to get to a different area or different road, and I didn't even notice it. I looped around and came straight back to the road I was already on. To the main road that runs fucking horizontally through Orleans. Okay. A minute. That's better. Alright. So yeah. Welcome back to another very poorly shot, poorly lit, just poorly executed video. Through and through, it seems. That would be a car, providing some amount of lighting. But, before, if you can't tell, I'm back in a park, so, just in a random neighborhood in the suburbs of the Orleans district of Ottawa. And if you also can tell, it is getting, well, it's just past dusk right now. I think I combined past and dusk into one word there. It's just past dusk. But before this video starts, or before, I always say that, it technically has already started. Before this, I get into what I want to get into with this video, I'll show you this. So this right here, and I know no one probably cares at all about this, but fuck it, it's my video, I will do what I want. Come on. Oh, you're a mess. This, can the camera see it? This is a slice of pie. Now, you might be asking yourself, Cam, why? Why bother putting that in a Ziploc bag, bringing it to a park, and just showing off a slice of really crappy looking pie? Well, because if you saw the last Exploring Ottawa video, the 4th part, you'll know I went on a little fruit picking venture around the suburbs of Orleans, and specifically I went to the western end of the district. Yeah, if you saw that video, that didn't go very well, that didn't go as planned. But I did get, long story short, I got apples from outside of a Catholic school, crab apples from outside of a veterinary clinic, closer to the center of Orleans in a business sector. And then, well, yeah, you know that I got those. Those are really the only two fruits that I actually, yeah, those were the only two fruits that I got. So, but when I got back after that video, when I got back with the fruit to where I've been situated for the last little while, where I've been staying, I tried the apples I got from outside of the school, and my God, they were the worst apples that I've ever had in my life. They were organic, as like from where they were growing. It's not like they weren't spoiled or anything. It's not like they were starting to deteriorate because of the season. No, they were just they were the most sour apples that I've ever had. No, like, seriously, they tasted like I had to spit the juice out. I only was able to, like, eat, like, 2 of them raw halfway through, and I had to spit the juice out of them, out of my mouth, because it tasted like what I imagine pesticide would taste like. You know the smell off of, like, some fruit that hasn't been washed, that has, like, more of a, that they've used, like, pest killers on it, mainly toxic, not like more toxically concocted like chemical solutions that aren't really good for the environment, that are meant to kill off any pests that could get into the product or into just the produce. Yeah, that's what it tasted like to me. The smell of that is what I imagine, like, that's what that smell tastes like, eating those apples. And these apples didn't smell like they had any pesticide added to them. I washed them as well. But so, because they were so... Oh, a piece of the apple just fell on the table. But because they were so unconsumable in their raw form, I just said, fuck it. So some people I know here in Ottawa, and we decided that we were actually going to have, or that they wanted to do a Thanksgiving dinner, because believe it or not, today, the day I'm recording this half of the video, is the night of Canadian Thanksgiving. Not the eve. Thanksgiving was today. And again, I don't know why Canadian Thanksgiving falls today. Don't ask me. I don't know the historical significance of that, if there is really any at all. And it didn't just get distorted traditionally throughout the centuries from something that initially was in a different form, kind of like Halloween used to. Believe it or not, actually, Halloween, it was very common in North America, or Upper North America, and some half of Europe, mainly I'd assume the western half, and Australia, is, well, Halloween obviously follows trick-or-treating, dressing up in spooky costumes and stuff like that, something that's, like, embracing more fear-driven things. I love Halloween, don't get me wrong, in many regards. Again, I talked about how some amount of dressing up I have moralistic issues with now, it seems, which is sad, but anyway, the tradition, however, centuries ago, it originated in Europe, in, I believe, northwestern Europe, more closer towards Netherlands, Belgium, or Denmark, and things like that, or upper Germany and the sort, where upper classes, again, this is more of like in monarchy times, it seems, when there was a lot of heavy monarchical rule over countries in Europe, and heavy prevalence on social hierarchy and class division. The upper classes would actually give food or in many regards, it would be a practice for people of higher wealth to give food to the peasants, or basically to the impoverished who couldn't afford it. Because, well, fucking the royal families stole so much of it. But anyway, so yeah, that's interesting. Anyway, so I decided, since we decided to do this Thanksgiving dinner, not on Thanksgiving today, but on, well, 2 nights ago on Saturday, I said, fuck it, I'm baking these apples, these crab apples, and the sumac that I had gotten from while I was staying in Crow's Landing, I had picked on the roadside outside of the entrance to the village, and I still have. I've been able to make it, freeze it, and it's stayed preserved for well over, I'd say 3.5 weeks now. I should also say, I forget, I didn't completely rewatch the video to see, but in my Made It to Ottawa video, I think I might have said that I'd been exploring the district that I was in, Orleans, for the past 2 weeks or so since I had gone to Ottawa. That was wrong. I should mention that with my psychosomatic illness, especially relating to memory, the thing that, for memory, that is most distorted for me is my perception of time, like the passage of time. I believe, well, being able to understand how much time has passed relates to your prefrontal cortex and things of the sort. I don't think there's any involvement with the parietal cortex for that. But anyway, yeah, my perception of time is a little distorted. I'll get into that in another video, but realistically it was about a week to a week and a half when I uploaded that video. I think it was a week that I had been there. But yeah, so sorry about that. Anyway, so I baked the sumac, the apples, and crab apples, which crab apples weren't terribly sour. They were pretty good on their own. Still have some, I believe. I baked them into a pie, and I put vanilla bean into, like, pure vanilla bean into it as well to give it a bit more of a slightly sweet because a lot of these things were sour. Like, sumac is somewhat sour, so is the apples, and so is the crab apples, so I thought, okay, maybe we give it a bit of a sweet tang along with the other sugars added. So yeah, it came out looking, depending on the light, it may look more appealing. But, the taste of it, well, it's very tart. It's very bitter and sweet at the same time. I don't know how I managed to do that. And even for an actual sugar addict like me, it's quite much. That's why I have such a small piece. So, yeah. Oh my. Oh god. Yeah. I'll eat this later. God. That is... no, and it all broke. Okay, fuck it. Throw it over there. You, apple, go away. Oh, fuck, I shouldn't have... Probably shouldn't have thrown it on the grass, considering it has sugar and a bunch of flour that probably may have issues decomposing in it now. But whatever. Small thing for now. God, I look like I'm about to detail a scary story. Hey, I guess, depending on who you are, some would consider this one. But, can I not like this any better? Is it gonna really be this dull the whole time? Maybe that's just my brightness. Okay, I'll keep it like this. So yeah, I'll be a floating head for most of this. There's no real good luminescent streetlights in the section of the park that I'm sitting in. But anyway, so this video doesn't really... okay, it has, like, there are things, a point that I want to talk about with it. There's a few things. But, it's mainly because I said in one of the Exploring Ottawa videos that I've just had, well, in the third part, I think, and also in the fourth part, technically, that I just had things that I wanted to talk about that were racing through my mind. So, I figured, and I said that I really have been trying to avoid making more just commentary talking point video, like ones that were really themed around one thing, like my first two Too Much Talking Twink videos. But, because, because of my morality crisis and things like that, but you know what, right now I've just said fuck it, why not, because yeah, why not. So, the main few things that I actually think would be worth, God, sorry again if I sound a bit this, as well as I should say, before getting into this, sorry if I sound a little, weird, because apparently for the last, last bit of time that since getting to Ottawa, I just seem to not be able to avoid contracting illnesses, because first I had, cold, and now I have strep throat, which is what I thought I may have had before, but, okay. So yeah, that's just what I thought I may have had before. But, now, I didn't have it before, but now that's most definitely what it is. It is most definitely what. Sorry, there's just a lot of activity around here right now this time. So yeah, I have strep throat. Hopefully it'll go away soon enough, but only time will tell. But anyway, so the main things that I wanted to talk about with, I'm really gonna have to hold it like right here. The main things that I want to talk about with this video, were the commodification of, well, children, basically, by adults, unjustly, in my opinion. The over-obsession or the over-fetishization, I guess I could say. Not really, not a fetish, no, not fetishization. I guess infantilization would be the proper word. I'll just say the over-romanticizing of, youthful beauty, like youthful, or just being young in general, from adults, and then the hypocrisy of that, actually, of how many people view youthful, the essence of being young, basically. And see, I guess, the pros and cons of different cultures, or just culture in general, which involves every culture that's on the planet. It doesn't matter which one it is. So, I guess I'll start now. So, I've been thinking a lot recently when it comes, again, this relates, again, if it wasn't apparent by now from everything that I've experienced recently and what I've been, well, talking about, I've been putting a lot of, like, heavy prevalence in my, in what I discussed. Like, I've been putting a heavy prevalence on, societal ageism, basically. And I've talked a lot in depth about this, well, about age-based discrimination. But recently, I actually recently got on a call with some friends of mine in Toronto. As I wanted to, or, well, I say some, but there was one in particular, a friend in Toronto who I'd been meaning to contact for the last little while, and and this was a few nights ago, we got to talking, and I was really happy to get a hold of them. They were talking about, they were having it'd been hard, why it had actually, well, I had been trying to actually, while I was at the cottage in Crow's Landing, I'd been trying to contact them at points, like, just before my departure, and I couldn't reach them. And then when I finally got a hold of them, they apologized, but and I wasn't offended or anything. It's just they explained why. Just because they're having a lot of high stress in their immediate life, family relation issues, some issues with their partner and things like that. And they were potentially going to take a trip actually to Colombia, not British Columbia, the province, the South American country of Colombia, with some family of theirs, just for, well, just as a trip together. But they were having second thoughts about it, and yada yada yada. I'm not going to detail, like, their whole business here. But we got to talking, and something was, they'd asked me how I was doing, and I brought up, well, I started going into, all of recent things that I've been, on my recent dealings and things like that. And, it came up to a point of, well, obviously I had talked about ageism that I had not only been facing recently, but I've discussed before, kind of been facing all my life in many regards. And they brought up things about how they... Now, I agreed with some of the things they said, other things I disagreed with them on. They're more so very heavy into the philosophies, it seems, of, well, I talked about the whole, in the May Auto video, the whole letting go of anger thing. Your internal lotus, and things like that. And how I disagreed with that philosophy, and I think that some amount of anger is actually healthy, and it just being completely passive towards manipulation will just lead to further manipulation, and so I feel that anger is justified in many ways, and it'll actually be beneficial for you in the long run. But they got into about how they were talking to me. Well, they were talking to me about how they thought I needed to really let go of my anger, or tried to at points. They weren't entirely demeaning me. And I'm not trying to insult... I want to make it clear, if this friend is watching this, I'm not trying to insult them. You are a fantastic friend. You've been a fantastic friend for the longest time. I consider you one of my best friends. I'm not trying to entirely insult you with this. I'm not trying to, like, you weren't being anything like overly mean or anything. It's what anyway, we'll get into that in a sec. They were telling me about how I told them my point about how I don't feel that just being passive will lead to a good outcome in terms of your actual, like, finding peace with yourself. I don't think that just I don't think letting go of anger is healthy for those who have not made, and, like, if you're angry at, like, a specific person or thing. Okay. I guess they didn't see each other going. Everyone's fine. As you can tell, you heard them go past each other. I don't, for a specific thing, or person more specifically, if they have caused you detriment, I do not believe it is healthy to just forgive a person and let go of said anger if that person has made no effort whatsoever, like any truthful, like, meaningful effort to change themselves and apologize. And this is me logically speaking. Has made an effort to apologize and actually, like, right their wrongs in a way, haven't actually put in the effort to do so. I think that is just an open door for you being, well, for you to be manipulated and used, sadly. But we got into it, and they at one point, and this is the point that getting off of that mainly, one thing I will say, they kind of said the one thing that they said, which after reflecting on it, like after the conversation and stuff, I'm gonna be honest, was not gonna lie, pretty demeaning, considering everything I just said. It was pretty, like, just dismissive, and it was demeaning. I don't think that they meant it to be demeaning. Like, they didn't mean it like that. Probably not. But it felt demeaning. They said basically, I understand, like, you're trying to figure things out. They said, like, but basically they said when I was talking to them about what I'm going through, my beliefs and stuff like that, everything that's happened, they basically just, like, they basically called me an old man, and this isn't, I don't take offense to this. They call me an old man in a young person's body, which I firmly agree with for the most part in terms of, like, how we look at wisdom traditionally being associated with age, which it absolutely is not, in my opinion. But basically they said, but you'll learn when you're older one day. Like, you'll learn it when you get older to just let go of it in anger, which little, like, brushing what I said aside. If I'm logically speaking here from my standpoint again, and I said this to someone else before, that you cannot predict how I will turn out. I can't even predict how I will turn out. I may, like, obviously I try to, if something new is presented to me, then I will assess it then. But no one can predict how they're going to end up one day. Nobody can. You can plan for something, but planning only goes so far. But, yeah, so basically that just felt a little demeaning. But anyway, that conversation with me and said friend, it got me thinking a lot more than I had been before about something that I didn't discuss. I've discussed, like, again, like I said, how I feel. Unfortunately, it's been spread throughout a lot of what's been sociologically spread throughout most of the world in relation to ageism, as well as many other detrimental things have been spread throughout different societies and cultures of the world. But this one relating specifically to ageism, something it got me thinking about was what I'm calling the commodification of children and teens. And now let me get into what I'm gonna, explain with that. Basically I'll quickly summarize it here. Basically how certain people, or I would say many, sadly, many adults in this world, and specifically, obviously it mainly pertains to like guardians, parents, or anyone who is a guardian figure. And again, I'm not labeling all, but I'm saying, in my view, sadly, most. Basically, using... The summary of what I mean by that is parental figures using children as a commodity for their own, social gain, basically. Their own social status. So, now, if I want to go in a bit further depth on that, I've talked about how I feel that sadly so many people in this world follow in a herd mentality, and would be more so relating to reaching histrionic I'll go as far as say histrionic traits in terms of their personality characteristics, and basically not actually using their critical thinking skills to determine what they feel to be right. They maybe, now in neuroscience research would detail that the hippocampus, which is responsible for memory recall and the formation of memory, and also it's responsible for depth perception in terms of your surroundings, but it basically, structure of the hippocampus, it takes in information from external forces, relays it, it forms the memories and learned information, relays it to the prefrontal cortex. The memory is for storage, for permanent memory storage, and is also responsible in retrieval of said memories and recall, and also in terms of learning, because the prefrontal cortex associated with learning, and it's responsible for a critical thought process. It also relays information of learned concepts to the frontal cortex. And anyway, so a theory I may have, and I don't think it's my theory, I think it's just a thing of many people, many psychologists, neurologists, neuropsychologists, neuroscientists, sociological researchers, historians. I think many people could agree with me on this, that I think a lot of how so much of societal constructs have formed, like what is pushed as to be basically how many governments have formed and societies have formed to push one narrative as if it's a construct, or a traditional construct, as one superior narrative, that this is the way things are, and this is right, sadly for the worse in many instances. I think that I think systematic and systemic like, problems, basically. Problems that have basically infested the entirety of the human race. Distort our cognitive ability to actually, like, critically think. I don't think that comes as a surprise to many people, if that is, like, that's not just a theory that I just pulled out of my ass. It's, well, this can be proven especially with things such as dissociative disorders and the like, and depression, or even if you're going to the latter half of, like, PTSD disorders, post-traumatic stress, which, for those who don't know, is a traumatic incidents, or it's basically a disorder. There are different forms of PTSD that, in a specific instance, something can trigger. It's brought on, it's onset by, like, past traumatic events that were very severe, that were very, well, that were disturbing, heavily disturbing to the individual suffering with it, and certain things it lingers on as almost in the brain, basically in the emotional status. You develop a disorder to basically, if a similar scenario, and everyone's different in this regard, but in a similar scenario, when the individual is placed in a similar scenario, the brain, or something that feels similar, like, in terms of stimuli to the brain, our psychological state basically throws us into in many people, it throws them into a panic attack state, or panic mode, or a very heavily reactionary mode, emotionally. Yeah, basically, like, many people become very neurotic, very reactionary, towards something. But anyway, I'm not going to go into that here. Sorry if it also, like, I'm stalling a bit with my words. It's quite cold out right now. Anyway, so I feel a lot of poorly made societal constructs, poorly thought of, poorly organized, and also, like, false or poor reasoning for, like, why they're even there in the first place, like, why, like, just shitty societal constructs, and it's societal ideas that are pushed, I think they distort cognitive ability to actually critically think well, at least in my opinion. Now, again, that's not me saying that anyone who thinks critically well, like, critically thinks and analyzes things, like, what I would deem to be thoughtfully, doesn't mean that everyone who does that is going to be the same, or doesn't mean that they're going to have the same ideas. They may have similar ideas. It just means that I think a lot of people, it hinders their ability to actually, like, think for themselves well enough, and it also hinders, like, memory recall in many instances. But anyway, and where I'm going with that is with the whole, like, histrionic and herd mentality behavior. Basically, just, yeah, no, 37, okay. Basically just going along with things to impress others. They want to feel socially connected, and they don't want to feel alienated because of that. And where I'm going with this is back to the whole using children just for your own gain, and using youth or someone who's younger than you for your own gain. And this could also, like, in instances like someone who's more manipulative or, again, sociopathic, could use, like, people can use older people in the same way. They could use them as a commodity too, which I'd actually say it's fair to say that there are a number of people who do, like, take advantage of the elderly in that form. But I'm still noticing around this area there are a lot of bikers and a lot of roller skaters. Anyway, but what I'm focusing on right now is specifically this part with children, using children as a commodity just for your own gain. So I think this is sadly very common. It's very common in most societies of the world, most countries, to see children used as just purely a means for the adults in the scenario to either fit in socially or just to solely gratify their own happiness. Like, there are parents who, like, say maybe their dreams of what they wanted to do career-wise didn't get, this is an example, didn't get fulfilled to the extent that they wanted it to, they wanted their dreams to, and therefore they start projecting their depression of, well, of their scenario, the depression of their scenario, either onto their children, like, if they become more egotistical, more higher importance, develop more egotistical traits, or develop more traits of narcissism, or become, what else, in terms of personality, could become more, what is the word I'm looking for? Well, okay, in terms of egotism and narcissism, they basically develop, well, thinking that they're, ironically, of more importance, or that they are better than their child, if their child is succeeding at something that they wanted to succeed at, but they didn't, in, like, more of a traditional stance of what is known as succeeding. God, it is cold. And my fingers are going somewhere. Anyway, or, say they start, along with becoming more egotistical, or they could become more domineering, domineering behavioral disorder. They basically start projecting their own sense of self, like the problematic parts of it, onto the child. Basically, like, say a parent wanted to be they wanted to become a lawyer, but they never really accomplished that dream. So they have a child because they just want to fit in, and they just feel, well, they think, oh, well, that's just, people are just supposed to have children around this age, like mid to late 30s, early 40s, around there, maybe like late 20s, early 30s, depending on culturally where you are in the world, as well. But say they start projecting onto the child, like, you need to study in school, you need to get a law degree, you need to know, heavily study criminology, and psychology, and attorney defense, you need to study the governmental declarations of our country. You need to know this so that you can, and then you need to get good grades in school so that you can get into a post-secondary school, college, or university, so that you can go to law school and become a very pristine lawyer. So then subconsciously, I will be gratified because, well, because that was my dream, and I'll basically feel that I created you, so I'm trying to live out my dream through you, basically. Which I think is terrible. So, should you have the right to do that legally? Sadly, yes, but no. But I think socially that is terrible. Anyway, so that's an example of what I'm saying, of like using children as commodity. But where I want to talk about like my frustration with this, as I if you couldn't tell, everything I talked about recently, I hate that. I despise it. It's to me, it's disgusting. It really is disgusting. But where I really feel that, what I guess I really want to say is, well, why it's disgusting is because so many people, it really just seems, they don't realize, and this comes back to as well as why I think that so many people demean children's intelligence, because they think they can't handle something, or they just, even if a child is mentally mature enough to handle it, like psychologically able to handle it, they just brush it aside and disregard their concerns over something. I think, well, speaking of which, it seems like there are some kids having fun over there. Anyway, they just brush it aside. I think it relates to that. I think it's because it comes from this, like, very, as I've talked about, authoritative, like an authoritarian psychology, basically. Like, this idea that children are, and in some regards, yes, they are inferior technically to adults, but that's not every regard, which is what I'm really getting at. I think a lot of people have pushed this idea throughout, well, traditionalist societies. They push this idea that children are just, they're all incapable of handling themselves. They're all just carefree, relaxed, basically just beauty obsessed, little, just, they're like these carefree animals, basically. They're just carefree, that they have no worries, that they have no real, basically, like, they don't have any, like, real emotion, I guess. Or they push the narrative that children are dumb, which is not true at all. But, hold on a minute. I'm gonna zip my coat up. Okay. Alright, yeah. That'd be the smarter move. Zip up my actual my attire that's supposed to be for colder weather. Then again, it doesn't exactly help much considering I'm wearing, where is it on the, I'm wearing ripped jeans. My ripped jeans, ow, my coccyx, my tailbone. I don't know why I said coccyx, I just find it funny to say. Shut up. Anyway, so basically, there's a push narrative that because children are incapable of certain things for the most part, at points that they are stupid, or that, as my friend kind of put it, that teenagers don't care about things, which I find to be completely wrong, just downright wrong. I mean, hey, from right now, I don't know if people could tell, I'm 18 years old. Well, couldn't tell that. I don't know if people could tell with how many times I have to scream it out that I care about many things. If that wasn't apparent. Anyway, so basically, they take it as like children are. There's this narrative that children are incapable of handling themselves, and I think it comes, like I said, from wanting to feel maybe powerful over someone that may be weaker, or a person that may be less capable of handling themselves in certain regards. But what I really have I have a problem with that. But what I really have a problem with, in terms of how people view children in this world, sadly, is, well, dog got a glowing color. Anyway, how people view children in this world, I really, really have a problem with the fact that, fine, look, if you want to view children as being these just dumb, like, vapid, smooth-brained entities, you know what? Fine. Again, legally, you, in my opinion, have all the right to view children as that. Socially, should that be acceptable? I don't feel so, but again, legally, you need the right to feel that. People can't police that. In my opinion, there's no real way to police that anyway. Okay, so fine. If you want to feel that way about teenagers and children, I can somewhat, for the most part, like, tolerate that. But what I really, and again, it's not, I don't want to sound like I'm intolerant to others' beliefs. I believe in discussion and accepting someone's beliefs no matter what they are, as long as they're not hurting someone else physically to a severe extent, and they're not trying to halt others from enjoying their lives to a large extent, basically. So basically, if someone has like more Nazi-esque beliefs, that even means yes, I would, or someone has more right-wing beliefs, yes, I would tolerate it, like, legally. Like, if someone is being hypocritical with those beliefs, more power to them. Like, I would hope that they're hypocritical with it, then I may actually be friends with you if you are a hypocrite on that stance. I don't think you should be. I think that's ridiculous, like, to even hold those stances if you're gonna not follow through with them. But you know what, as long as you're not hurting anyone, like I said, we can be buddies, or like we can, like, well, even if they did hurt someone, we can discuss. But anyway, what really gets to me, what really makes me sad and very, very angry, very upset, is using your children as just props, basically, for your own benefactor. Like, I used to, here's the thing, up until like maybe the last, I want to say maybe the last 8 months or so, I used to believe that you really, no, obviously you're entitled legally to have children. I don't think that having children is, despite being an agnostic atheist, it's a bit of a problem I have with some forms of atheist culture. I don't believe that it's inherently problematic to have kids. I don't think, like, again, I don't logically believe that humanity is a virus. I don't believe that we're inherently destructive. I'm out here questioning all that, but I don't logically feel that way. So I don't have a problem. I used to have a problem with, like, the only reason for you having children being, like, because we wanted to have kids. We just wanted to create a life, basically. I used to have a problem with that. I don't so much anymore, because I know logically, I feel that we all have, as I've said before, selfish and selfless tendencies. We all have more self-centered qualities, and we have more, in terms of, well, moral decisions and philosophy, I'd say altruistic qualities. We have more, like, again, just, we have more self-centered qualities, and then we have more compassion and empathic qualities, like sympathetic qualities, and selfless qualities. So, but for the more selfish qualities, I don't feel, I used to have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with now, because of those, what I know in psychology at least, about our human nature in that sense, having selfish and selfless qualities. I don't have a problem with, say, adults or parents, or, well, soon-to-be parents, I guess, just purely, like, just having children for the sake of having them, basically. I used to, like, earlier on, when I was younger, but, it's interesting, they're wearing a yellow vest, so like they're community worker of some kind. or they're just wearing it for, like, safety at night. But, anyway, I don't have a problem with adults having kids just for the sake of having them. That's not what I have a problem with anymore. I have a problem when said child is eventually is born. Once the child is born, I have a problem with you using that child solely for your own benefit. Solely, like, seeing your child as basically seeing them as property and just something to be owned and fully controlled, which well, I think it's deplorable. Because, despite what people may think, and I've said, I do not believe, and there is much scientific proof to back this. I've even, in the last few days, further looked into the research of this. There is proof that, well, there's proof that intellectual capacity, and maturity in terms of the emotional state of a human varies greatly depending on person, like person by person. And age, for the most part, is not a factor. And it's very clear, as well, as I've said before, that there is much proof, and I'm fully ready to say that I don't even think this should be considered a theory anymore in terms of neuroscience. I think it should be, like, genuinely, like, it should be deemed like a scientific fact that our brains never stop developing. Like, obviously, unless, say, someone was to gain certain brain diseases such as different forms of dementia or lesions in the brain. Even then, just because you have a lesion doesn't mean other parts of the nervous system stop developing. Hell, even in dementia, I guess, while the atrophy is catching up, I'm sure that some small level of neurogenesis is possible. Well, no, neurogenesis we know is possible. It is possible. There are even experimental treatments with induced neurogenesis. It's just, like, neural cell repair. It's just in dementia, obviously they start to die neurons start to die at a rapid rate in the cerebrum, cerebellum, and, well, the brainstem, and all that, and also the limbic system. But what I'm saying is, in a healthy brain, and again, this varies not even a fully healthy brain, just in most people's, well, neurocortexes, just our brains in many regards, don't ever stop developing. I really feel that should be considered a scientific, like, fact, an absolute fact in neurology and psychology. And in terms of philosophy and, well, study of philosophy, and again, a certain realm of psychology in epistemology, which is the study of intellectual thought and intelligence, basically, or considered intellectual properties. So I am really sickened, given that bit of knowledge. I'm really sickened by the fact when so again, I don't have a problem with you just merely birthing a child. Like, I don't have a problem with you banging or with artificial insemination to just have a child for the sake of creating life, because you want to create a human, like, and go through that process. I don't have a problem with that. My problem comes with once that child has actually come into the world, you not realizing that that child is only going to further develop into a human capable of critical thought and analysis and understanding and reasoning, moral judgment, and have their own pursued interests, and develop their own set of personality characteristics and behaviors, and mental thought process, and basically just not seeing them as a human being. And this, again, this doesn't even just go for ageism. This goes for any form of, like, unjustified discrimination. Like, it doesn't matter what it may be. And also, I guess it really sparked, like, my want to talk about this. I recently found, I've been meaning to actually, the last little while, I would say. Fingers are getting... Oh, my fingers are going numb. I've been meaning for the last little while to check out a YouTube channel called Andrewism, which they're relatively well known in the political commentary and ideology, like, community on YouTube. I checked them out, and they're incredible, the videos they make. Don't really like how seemingly overly, like, demanding they are, like, with certain things. Like, not demanding, but some things he says, like, we need to do this, we need to do that, but it doesn't really say whether he has solutions for that, like how to achieve certain things societally, or is a bit too, I think, sometimes overconfident in certain things. But anyway, other than that, they're a fantastic channel. And anyway, one of their videos, which I think I may link down in this, is, oh, that one to find it up. Okay, that's odd timing for it to cut the video right there. I may link their channel, not their channel, this video, because it talks about youth liberation, basically, and ageism, basically people of younger ages facing heavy, unnecessary discrimination. And basically, when I was talking to this friend of mine in Toronto, one point they brought up was that they thought, yeah, but I think some form, like, amount of ageism is needed. Like, I do think it is needed, which, okay, well, ageism is specifically discrimination based upon age, and, like, prejudice. It could be prejudice as well, more so. But I hear your point. I think, like, okay, for some things, yes, I do think there is some amount of, like, maybe social or even, like, legal restriction that should be needed depending on, like, your age. If you were trying to, like, blanket, like, how most, well, how most human, children develop, then yes, some amount, like, in terms of, say, like, well, I think a lot of the alcohol laws of the world are really stupid, and marijuana laws, but, like, drug laws in general, I think are terrible, but, I really feel like in terms of that type of content, it should really be more so, like, the amount that's policed. Like, I'd say, like, maybe teenagers starting at maybe, like, 13 to 14 should be allowed to drink, like, just, I think in terms of, like, selling to, like, in terms of, like, a company selling to someone below the age of, like, 19, or, like, well, here in most of Canada, the legal drinking age is 19, except for in Quebec and Yukon, which it's 18. I think it should really be based on, like, the amount of alcoholic content in a drink, instead of just blanketing all alcohol. And the same, I think, goes for weed. In fact, I think it should be the same for most recreational drugs, is that it's the amount that, like, that one should be allowed to have legally, just based on, like, purchase, should be regulated. Now, societally, I don't think you can regulate, like, what every person does, obviously, and, like, their use of it in every given moment, like how much they were to take. But that's just why I'm for a minimalistic police force. But anyway, and I don't think that should be, like, a majorly arrestable offense. But anyway, so, and also, like, in relation, obviously, to, like, things like such as sexual intercourse and stuff like that, that I feel, logically, yes, I feel there should be some form of legal regulation on. But I've talked about before how I feel there should be, at least between the ages of 13 and 22, some form of close in age range consent, like legal consent, between people who are no more than 2 years, like, they're not older than 2 years of the person of in between those ages, and they're not younger than a person, like, 2 years, like, beyond 2 years younger than a person of that age. And as well as, this will bleed into, like, the next thing I'm going to talk about in a sec. Basically, so anyway, what I'm saying right now is, because of histrionic tendencies, it seems, a lot of adults use children as basically just a puppet in their social circles. And this isn't, and again, I'm saying adults, mainly parental figures and guardians. It can also apply to, well, teachers. It can apply to schooling systems, using children as just, looking at them basically as the grade that they're in, sadly. Which, again, I've talked about how I hate most schooling systems in the world. But basically just seeing them as, well, for schools, seeing them as just molds of clay that they can form into what the overall, well, what the overall traditionalism of a society dictates, basically, or basically their views of what they want for said children. Now, does that mean all? And again, I've said not all traditionalism is bad, but the traditionalist mindset, basically, like, discouraging actual critical thought from the child, which I think is directly the reason for why so many children seem like they can't critically think, or people, like, a lot of people think that children are dumb, like I've said, when they really, really aren't. They are very intuitive, curious. They actively try and explore things to understand things in many regards, whether consciously or subconsciously. And they try to, I think a lot of, like, why children can behave really is just worse, not even worse, just carbon copies of their parents or certain adults that people deem as unsavory, is because, well, either A, they've been repressed from exploring those ways, or they're just carbon copies of their terrible parents. Like, they grew up around how they've seen how their parents behave and things like that. So it's no wonder that, I'm gonna say this, if your child is like, if you behave in a way that, like, here's like an example of internalized ageism. If you're telling your child that they're basically just, that you don't know any better, you're too young to understand, and I know what's best, and you're just a dumb kid, basically, are you really going to be surprised if they become, like, very reserved from you, and very, like overly reserved and antisocial from, or are you going to be surprised when they start behaving in ways that we would be considered, like, detrimental, or, like, immature? Are you really going to be surprised if that they're going to behave that way, if that's what they're being fed, like, from a parents and other parts of society? And again, there are certain things that I don't blame for that, like, this gets into iffy issues about my morality crisis of art. I don't get why. Okay, I don't know why that car just stopped there for seemingly no reason. They might just be checking something, like, on their phone or something. Or like things with art, I don't think, because the art is inherently interpretive, so I don't think that, like, the artist can be blamed, sadly, if they didn't intentionally try to induce something with their art. If they did intentionally try and induce something with their art, like a certain stigma or a poor representation of something, well, then, yes, I think you should, like, can be justifiably angry at them. Legally, should they have the right to? Yes, sadly. But anyway, or, like, in certain advertisements, I guess. But anyway, point being, I just want to say that there are a lot of, for this point, there very obviously is a lot of commodifying youth for the benefit of the old, and not in a good way. Like, not, basically just using them to make themselves look better. I've experienced it. I can definitely say, I'd say, like, at least 85 to 90% of the world has experienced it in some way. But anyway, the next thing I wanted to talk about, in relation to that, was this ironically, despite what I just talked about of how just basically using children as a prop for your own gain. God, my hand is cold. And my whole body is cold. Yeah, it really was not wise to go film this at night. But I wanted to get it out. I don't care. Ironically, this also is very embedded, I think, in a lot of societies and cultures around the world, is the over-romanticization of youth. Like, it's so strange how, at least to me, and again, I say that, but I do logically, like, from my own research of psychology, would understand why, well, so many people turn out this way in adulthood. But basically, it's so ironic that we call children dumb. We say that they're immature, all of them are not capable of critical thought or understanding. They're not capable of making their own decisions to a certain extent. And that they have no insight, basically, whatsoever. But yet, we praise children for, well, there are people who just give them false praise for seemingly, like just seeming intelligent, but they're really just trying to humor them, it seems. But we give them praise for just being beautiful, like physically. Like, we demean them for what people demean them for their intelligence, yet they over-obsess about children's physical appearance. And basically, they just, like, you'll hear it from so many people, like, saying, oh, you're young, you have so much vibrance in life, like, you have so much potential, you're young, you should be young and free and having fun, and you're being physically virile, and like this it's so strange that actually, like, we talk about protecting children, like from sexual predators and things like that, which obviously I do believe you should, but at the same time, so many of those same people, like, over-sexualize the children. Do you know what I mean? So many people just, like, say that you should be wanting of, like, being... It's funny. People say you should be wanting of being rebellious in, like, a subtle way, just saying, like, oh, you should, like, oh, like, when I was a kid, I snuck out of the house, or, like, when I was a kid, I was out partying, I was banging, like, 20 people a night, which, again, I'm not, me coming from someone who wants to be a pornographer, logically, and who is polyamorous, so that's not me saying, like, having sex with that amount of people is bad. I'm just saying that, like, they're saying, oh, I was what's traditionally considered wild and crazy, and going against the grain, but then when their own children go against the grain, or, like, think this is a better way of approaching it, and they actually provide genuine proof, like, intellectual proof that this is a better way of handling something, or why I should be able to do this, then they're just like, oh, you don't know. You're just you're dumb. You're young, you're dumb, you don't know. So basically, like, they put an overprevalence on like children. Just basically how so many people look at it. It seems like people just look at children and teenagers as like beautiful dolls, just beautiful like airhead puppets that are just there, that will one day become proper like them. But right now they're just sex crazed morons, basically. Again, I don't want this to sound like I'm being so-called prudish, even though I could get into a whole another thing. I've talked about this before, like in my Peterborough videos, about how people will shame me like for saying I want to be a sex worker and things like that, or like my views on like sex work, like how it should be used, are too radical or too like idealistic, or like people will shame me for saying like I'm too promiscuous because of it, or I'm like some dirty slut, which, but then literally in the other way around, people will on the one hand who aren't like more for it, aren't more for sex work and things like that, will say I'm too reckless. But then the people who are actually in sex work or are supportive of it will say I'm too conservative, basically. It's a weird duality for me. Which both ends I find are very problematic in that regard. But basically, I'm saying is like, I think this, like people say in this regard, like I also coming somewhat similar to sex work and relating to ageism. People say like putting, like at least what's legally here in Canada, the age would be to go into say something like pornography is like, people say like you shouldn't put your sexuality on like display for the world. People who are saying that really should have a problem with mainstream media then, if they really are saying that, and like things of the sort like sex scenes and nudity. You really should be not. You really should actually have a more clear moral stance on that, if that's the case. Which I disagree that that's what it's doing in most regards. But yet, these same, like we say that you shouldn't put your private life, what is considered private, out there for the world to see, and yet most of these people engage in over idolizing celebrities, people who have become extraordinarily famous, they engage in like just brushing off like how we very much, well, how people especially in consumerist like mediums, like in terms of like advertisements, how companies, as I've talked about before in my last before leaving the college video, they over-sexualize their many times models just to sell a product, which I don't inherently think like the picture, maybe like the photographer took of the model in it, is like over-sexualizing the model like photography wise, because I genuinely think like it can be done well. I'm just saying like the reason for it is over-sexualizing. The fact that the company is only doing it literally to just, they don't care about the sensualism of the photo. They don't care about the portrayal of human, like, sensuality and sexuality. They don't care about that. They just care about making a profit, basically. Again, legally, should they have the right to do that? I logically feel so. Does that mean they should? No. But anyway, what I'm saying is, and at the same time, like, it's very apparent as well in, like, child celebrities or, like, teen... Okay, well, some house across the street just turned on their outside lights. That's a bit better lighting. They, it's very prevalent, like, I feel that, like, this hypocrisy is very, like, prevalent in how people view, like, teenage celebrities. Like, pop star singers and stuff like that. Now, I don't feel like that it's anyone's fault who becomes a celebrity. I don't think that's something that can actually be controlled. Like, especially with the internet nowadays, you could literally just do something, like, funny, like, you could upload a 5-second clip of you falling down the stairs, and all of a sudden you're a famous internet meme. Like, I don't think fame is really something that you can actually control. If someone likes, like, just a lot of people, unfortunately, are drawn to what you're doing, then, well, then fame is really unavoidable in that regard. And the same goes for, I think, and again, logistically, like, in terms of certain artistic creation, I think in that realm, that children and teens should have the right to create in, like, songwriting and, like, standardized, like, film starring, not, like, stuff for sexual entertainment or things like that. In my opinion, no. Even if it was an anarchist world, I think you should wait. If anyone was like, if anyone, in my opinion, had the mental, if a child or teen was actually really mentally mature, like, and they wanted to be more physically open with their, like, sexuality and, like, expressing themselves sexually, then I think they would have if they were mentally mature, then they'd have the ability to wait until they were older, would realize, like, the physical detriment it could cause, like, by not, in pretty well every scenario possible. And again, me questioning human nature and things like that out here, so maybe I'll realize something different. I don't know. But, anyway, I find it really, like, we see it in, like, celebrity teen culture, where there's this worship by paparazzi and news organizations, like journalist organizations, on, like, on the youthful beauty, basically, of, like, teenagers in the limelight. And they're, like, very much encroaching upon, like, their bodies and body images, which is monumentously hypocritical, in my opinion, and monumentously, it's disgusting in terms of, like, and I'm not saying, like, everyone who takes, like, if a teenage celebrity goes for a photo shoot and they're, like, and this is the stupid thing, like, just because someone's wearing, like, looser clothes or, like, clothes that expose more skin does not mean it's sexual. Like, or does not mean that that person is wanting of sex in any regard. It's, like, the way I see it, and I think I put this, like, I think I said this in one of my videos before, that the way I look at it, in terms of, especially for, like, entertainment pertaining to sexuality and, like, sexual arousal and things like that, or just art in general, or really just human life in general, what we choose to wear fashion-wise, in like for the first half of what I'm gonna say here is that nudity is not inherently sexual, but there is nothing inherently wrong with nudity being sexual. If you get what I mean by that, like, and I'm sure you can figure out what I mean by that. So, like, because we see it as well, like in schools, especially as well, in many school systems of the world, either they have a specific dress code, or uniform, which I really am against. People claim that it eliminates bullying. No, it doesn't. It really does not. I think that's a really... Again, legally, the school, in my opinion, has the right to mandate what they choose. In terms of, like... in terms of dress attire. In certain regards. Certain regards. But... should they? No. In terms of, like... uniforms will not eliminate bullying. It won't. It really won't. Like, people think, like, this is, like, again, comes back to a really stupid way we think of how bullying works, that just because you wear something different, which, yes, it can obviously be the case for someone who thinks that someone is more, again, in a egotistical and histrionic sense, that they think they're not like them and they care about other people caring that they have the appearance that they are like everyone else, so they target specific people to make them feel better about themselves, and also just to outcast them as like the scapegoat, as like the freak of things. But anyway, and I think it's really stupid. Yes, that is, and that can pertain to what you wear. It shouldn't. But I think it's really an oversimplification that we just chalk bullying in a large extent to be, like, chalk it up to wearing something different. Like, if you have a uniform, no one's gonna... people may not even wear it the exact same way unless the school, like, very dictatorily mandates it. Like, anyway, I just feel it's really, like, what I was going with that is, like, we see it in schools as well. There will be teachers. I've had, like, friends of mine, mainly female friends of mine, tell me, and also, to a large extent, some transgender, trans people that I've known in the past, tell me that they've been told to, well, basically cover up their skin. Like, just basically, if a girl's wearing, like, or anybody is wearing, like, a skirt that's, like, at their buttstock or something like that, like, right at their buttstock, or if they're wearing a sports bra and things like that, they're just told, like, you're showing too much skin. You're gonna distract, what is known traditionally in, sadly, subtle patriarchy mindset is, you're gonna distract the boys, basically, not taking into account people of other sexualities other than heterosexual, but basically that you're just gonna be, you're gonna attract, like, sexual attention to yourself. A, that's not their fault. B, they... oh great, my phone is dying. It's not inherently sexual is what I'm saying. Just letting someone be free with what they wear. Like, here's the thing. You could walk around naked, completely naked, and that does not mean you're behaving in a sexual way. It's so idiotic. Like, it really is just... it's idiotic. It's really... it's abysmal. And it even, like, it also relates, again, it's kind of similar to what I said about, like, in sex work, how if someone, people think as well that if someone who's in sex work is sexually assaulted, that's either A, they were asking for it, or B, oh, well, they chose that line of work, so who cares? Yeah, I'm going to tell you right now, we didn't choose that line of work to be assaulted. For whatever reason we chose it, whether it was because of our actual desire to create sexual entertainment, or like to express human sexuality that way, giving people some sort of sexual relief through entertainment, and having them have sexual connectivity with it, and as well for themselves if they're more polyamorous, um, or if they did in some regard go to it from some sort of traumatization in their past, if they're subconsciously trying to seek attention from neglect, or they're going towards it because of sexual assaults and trying to basically reclaim their sexuality subconsciously, or develop sex addictions such as, well, old term would be nymphomania, or hypersexuality, or they're trying to absolve loneliness, whatever else. We still, most of us, want to go to it. Well, we go into it in the hopes that it'll be consentful and not being completely, like, unconsentfully dominated. Now, that doesn't mean all domination, like, in sex is bad. Like, in terms of if you have a more of a dominatrix fetish or something like that, or I guess if you're more of a sadist. But if you're doing it unconsentfully, that is horrible. So, yeah, screw you if you believe that. One, that is an idiotic belief that we are asking for it if we're sex workers. That we're just... Yeah, it's just disgusting that you throw us to the side like that. Anyway, back to this overprevalence on youthful beauty. I feel it is very unhealthy to see, well, children in that light. I think it's incredibly encroaching to... And I also think it's not just encroaching to the children, I think it's detrimental to adults. I think it's detrimental to your own psychological health to actually view youth as some incredible, superior stage of life. And I think it actually can contribute to a lot of, like, major depression in people of older ages, like thinking that, oh, I'm ugly now, I'm physically not as capable as I used to be of something, or I'm disgusting because I'm old. Like, I long for the days. It becomes, like, leads to overly longing for, like, the past, and like just how you were physically, like, beauty-wise back in the day. I've actually experienced this with someone in my former household in Toronto who has histrionic personality disorder, and is overly obsessed with their, not just like how their ego is presented to someone else, but physically how they're presented to someone else. They constantly think that they are so very much internally depressed about their looks. They think they're ugly now because they have skin disorder, some kind of epidermal disorder, and very sagging skin. They have they call it rapid aging because I think one of Okay, rapid aging, like in actual terms, would be like medical terms would be like progeria, uh, like physically rapid aging, like in terms of the bone structure and skin structure. Rapid aging, like far beyond your actual age, like your bone mass, basically weakening at a rapid rate. And again, I'm not an expert on like, I'm not an I'm not an osteologist or anything like that, though I research in the realms of all medical stuff, but again, I'm not an expert on that, but progeria is rapid aging. They don't have progeria. So, they just, the term basically, it's like their skin, though, is like, almost like that of an elderly person. But, they themselves they see themselves as being hideous. And they really are overly self-deprecating because of it. Anyway, I actually think specific to like teen celebrity culture, like in terms of like how the paparazzi and how much news media encroaches upon them, I think this view of teenagers being like this virile, like them being like very sexually active and very ironically free, despite how not free like so many adults make it for them, is just as perverted and encroaching as, say, someone who of an older age who is trying to like basically groom a younger person into soliciting sex from them. Basically, I think it's just as perverted. And my phone is dying rapidly. Shit. So, okay, I'm gonna let it get some charge, and then I'm gonna continue this. Hold on. Alright. Okay. Yeah. I don't care. I'm wearing the mask again. I haven't too much fun with this, and I'm freezing, and fuck it, if I freeze to death, then I'm dying in this. Ooh, that's kinda... That looks like something. It's kinda freaky. Well, not freaky. Anyway, my phone is somewhat on a slant. It's got the portable charger hooked up to it. What I'm going to try and quickly talk about here is... So, okay, I talked about the commodification of children for adults. I talked about how there's an overprevalence on beauty, like youthful beauty in children, which I really hate, and I consider it just as perverted as those who are... Okay, I should actually say right now that my car's going by, I'm going to take it off somewhat. I should say that I've changed my stance somewhat, is what I said before, in the second Too Much Talking Twink on, I'll put it back down. I've changed my stance somewhat on how I believed that solely, like they talk about in psychology, that pedophilia is a mental disorder, which in certain regards I would say now it is. I also mentioned how though in pedophilia and herbophilia, which are more related to the teenage years, from an adult having an overbearing sexual obsession with that age range, or just being attracted to that age range in some way, is not psychological. Well, not psychological pedophilia, obviously, those are the terms for it. But it wasn't encroaching just psychologically to have those thoughts about that age range, as long as you're not acting upon it, because of how the similarities are in, well, physical appearance and stuff like that. Which might be ironic considering everything I just talked about, but no, I was talking more in the physical there of how so many people like have an prevalence on over-obsessing, like, that would be considered, in my opinion, like, physically acting upon your over-obsession with that. But now I think it is coming more clear that, sadly, I would say that there have been talks about how pedophilia is a sexuality, but it has dire consequences, which, okay, for some people, I would say I would classify it as a mental disorder, such as I would classify, I guess, encroaching, as I would call it, in pedophilia and herophilia as mental disorders. Just like, I would say sex addiction could be considered a mental disorder. And also would relate to domineering behavior disorder, or having a fear fetish in terms of, like, if you're, say, acting sexually encroaching. But in terms of that, though, yes, I could say maybe for some people it's not just. It comes for some people the mental disorder. Others, I think it can be an overbearing thing to do with power, overbearing, domineering behavioral disorder, and also it could, like, because we see a lot of powerful figures, unfortunately, who are either pedophiles or they act upon pedophilic and herbophilic, thoughts and desires, sadly, probably to feel more powerful in many ways. But then there are others that I think maybe for them it is actually a sexual orientation and they have a sexual attraction to it, which is, well, obviously if they're acting upon it, they have sexual attraction, but I mean, like, actually they are desiring for that. They've just grown to develop in that way. It's sad, and I think it's the only real sexuality that should actually be repressed in some way, like in terms of, like, your own self-control, which I think psychological therapy can help with that. And a lot of people would use that as an excuse, which unfortunately, one of my favorite YouTubers, Joey B. Tunes, I like him as a person. He makes damn good content for the most part. Certain things I heavily disagree with him on, especially his stance on transgenderism and different genders, and his stance, it seems, on sex work. I really don't like his takes on them at all. I think they're really poorly constructed and stupid. Anyway, if he ever sees this, he's probably going to say, oh, coming from the guy in a golden cat mask. And by the way, again, if he does see this, Joey, I'm not, like, I'm not doing this as, like, a hate video towards you. I genuinely like your content. I'm just saying I disagree heavily with certain things you say. I'll get more into that in a different video. Anyway, the reason, I'll just state clearly, is why other sexualities such as homosexual, bisexual, pansexual, spoliosexual, gynosexual, androsexual, polysexual, the things of the sort, are not detrimental inherently, is because between older teenagers and adults, when it's consentful, there is no physical detriment that is going on there if it was acted out in a healthy way. That's why. So I think that's, I'll get more into that in a different video, just to clear that up. It's sad, but, well, what I said, so I reevaluated my stance in that sort. And does that mean I encourage, like, no, anything to do with, like, infanophilia or herbophilia or pedophilia? Absolutely not. I have just said that I still believe that in some sort of legality stance, that I still believe that age of consent for a person in between the ages of 13 to 22 in some form of legality to have intercourse or sexual relations with someone beyond 2 years of your age I think that should be, in most parts of the world, raised to 22. Like, for that to be considered technically lawful. But, anyway. Different topic. What I'm going to talk about now is relating to, cultural stance, cultural practices. What am I at in terms of percentage? Still 8. No, it's dead. Oh, fuck. Okay, well, I'll try and talk quickly with this. It relates back to what I was saying with how a lot of traditional mindset has influenced, like, the ageist beliefs and things of the sort. But I also talked about in my last, I briefly mentioned in the last Exploring Ottawa video I made, that, I feel that there is good and bad to pretty well every culture on this planet, which I think, sorry, strep throat, still bugging me, I think is a fair enough thing to say. I think even, like, most people who are very passionate about their culture could agree with me in some stance on that. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of people, they don't, this is what I'm saying about lack of critical thinking, they don't examine parts of their own culture and what they practice traditionally, and just see it as a good thing just because it's part of the culture. I've actually gone into many talks with friends of mine about this, which, in my stance, just because it's part of a culture does not mean it's good. It really doesn't. There are multiple good things about culture, and it's disgusting how hundreds of cultures across this planet have been treated by other cultures, have been basically just alienated, other cultures have committed cultural genocide to certain cultures that have been prevalent in certain lands and other areas of the world, mainly through imperialism and colonialism. But, my hair is in my eye. Okay. Staying like that. But I just feel people should really examine, like, the practices they engage in, and whether, like, examine the good and the bad out of all of them. Like, because it can really lead to histrionic behaviors, and it can over, like, not actually bothering to look at what you're engaging in culturally and societally can lead to, as well as that, egotism, in many regards, higher egotism, and also could relate to some form of, as we clearly know, superiority complex, and some level of higher narcissism, and how am I gonna like this? That might be better. Can lead to some form of narcissism, higher narcissism, and yeah, just along those lines, or just feeling superior. And I think that is really detrimental. Like, but that doesn't mean, like, okay, basically what I'm saying, don't engage in, like, the good practices of said culture. Acknowledge the good practices, but acknowledge the detrimental things, or things that could be potentially detrimental out of them, and work either around them or absolve them entirely. Like, what are examples I can pull from? Let's go with, okay, let's first go with many, I guess it's being from a more European, like, cultural standpoint, much of, Caucasian culture, like, white, much of white North American culture, or upper North American culture, or white European culture. A lot of, especially in Western Europe, okay, let's look at the good aspects, or what I would say are good aspects. In a lot of white culture in Europe and dying again, and other things like that in white culture in North America, there's prevalence on more, what's the word? Some more prevalence on being composed. There's more prevalence on composure of self. There's more in terms of fashion, like what's culturally predominant in terms of attire, I guess, in certain regards, would be more straightened and matching patterns in terms of clothes and attire, which isn't inherently bad. There's a prevalence on there's a prevalence on in terms of musical consumption, I guess, would be more classical music originates from most of Europe, but the car's turning the other way. So good aspects would be certain things like that, composure. More, there's family value. Really, a lot of culture relates. There's a lot of many cultures that relate around family values, where yeah, having a higher prevalence on like family activity and things like that. You get what I'm trying to say. But the bad thing is a lot of prevalence, a lot of white culture. There is, well, can be a lot of racial bias, especially in North American white culture. There's unfortunately a lot of ageism that is prevalent there. Well, prevalent in the culture. There is, in many degrees, especially in God, the mask is getting a bit hot. In many degrees, in rural North American white culture, like more rural country culture, there's a lot of prevalence, unfortunately, there's a lot of toxic masculinity, I would say, sadly. There's a lot of great traditions in terms of like square dancing and things like that, and also living a more simplistic life in terms of farming goods and more of your own cultivation, more like some amount of self-reliance, which is good, but there's also a higher prevalence on like, well, being in favor of, in my opinion, capitalism, and also there can be, like I said, especially in North American rural white culture, there's a lot more, well, hefty racial prejudice and religious prejudice as well. Hefty in terms of like, well, white supremacy in some regards, but anyway, so that'd be what I consider the good and the bad for it. What's another one? Okay, let's say much of certain black communities, or like black culture in some regards. We see, or in like say the music industry, the hip-hop culture and things like that. There's a lot of heavy prevalence again on family values, on the family unit, being more connected. I'd say that's another thing I forgot to say. I guess more connected as a family in white culture too, a European-centered white culture, I guess. In terms of black culture as well, there's prevalence on family values, on more prevalence on philosophies of realism, being realistic to yourself and also to your surrounding environment. There's more prevalence in fashion. There's a lot of, especially in hip-hop culture, there's a lot of more loosely fitted clothes. There's a lot more well, actually, there's a lot of hip-hop culture that actually, and R&B culture, like in terms of like fashion design, that blended with gothic culture, or like emo culture, and things of the sort. So again, more loosely fitted clothes in many regards. And also in certain black cultures, say in Africa, there's a lot more prevalence in fashion terms of, well, in certain headwear in context to like how a lot of hair forms, like their natural forming hair, to keep it in the positions that they are, such things like do-rags to create waves. Um, it's very common in other headdresses that are also known in, well, do-rags are more common as well in North America, but there are different headdresses as well in Western Africa and things like that. There's also a lot that is prevalent in representing like the land they came from, like different vibrant colors in the dress wear. That is, well, prevalent, especially also in North American black culture. There's a lot more, I guess, heavy prevalence on, as well as physical expression of your environment, I guess. But and also heavy prevalence on relaxation, being more, I guess, go with, not really, I guess, go with the flow, but more of like being simmer, being, I guess, not composed, but being more relaxed, I guess to say. I'm sorry, I'm really cold right now. I'm really trying to find words, and my dissociation is bad. I'm very trying here with what I'm trying to say. But, so that's a good aspect. And in terms of hip-hop music and things like that, being more, not eccentric, being more, note to self, never record one of these at night, closer in autumn or winter, and also be moving the next time you record one of these. Don't sit down when it's cold. Jesus Christ, Cam. Anyway, being more emotionally expressive, I'll say, in terms of the music, in many regards. Now, this isn't all. I don't want this to become a blanket thing where I'm like trying to stereotype or over like archetype something. But anyway, but the negative aspects to it, unfortunately, we've seen a lot of black communities, is unfortunately, and this can be attributed in many regards, in my opinion, to internalized racism because of societal stigma in many regards, which can also be said about other cultures as well, which includes white culture, in terms of other things, but, well, not specifically racism in North America, but anyway, it can be attributed to internalized racism. There's unfortunately heavy instances that we see of toxic masculinity, unfortunately, of basically being, this is like, there's a heavy prevalence on men being like more aggressive in terms of, not stern, which is a masculine trait, but more, and I don't want this to say like it's a stereotype that like black people are aggressive, which, or like communities are more prone to aggression, which is completely untrue. But I'm just saying that some people internalize this, and it can lead to a toxic masculine trait of being more authoritative, or things like that. And also, unfortunately, in many of the certain forms of rap culture, unfortunately, there's a prevalence of more homophobia, sadly, and transphobia, or agenderphobia, and things of the like, which I think, again, it's sad. Like, it's not, well, again, not everyone, but I'm just saying this is, unfortunately, a negative thing that has been associated, has become a part of many aspects of these cultures. So those are the negative things there. Or, unfortunately, there could also be a heavy prevalence in terms of the realism on, in, say, a capitalist world, heavy prevalence on making money, unfortunately, and only getting, like, your amount to keep yourself well, and it can lead to more self-centered overbearingly self-centered attitudes. What's another one? Okay, Islamic culture, let's say. There's a high prevalence on in Islamic culture. It's very prevalent from being caring, being very hospitable, I guess I would say, or very open to like people foreign from your culture, being very welcoming, basically. And again, I'm going to say high prevalence on family values, sticking together as a family, or caring about your family unit. There's high prevalence on being more spiritually in touch with yourself, in many regards, and high prevalence, it can, in many regards, in many Islamic teachings, there's also prevalence on meditation, but also that can relate to prayer in some way, but they're not the same thing. Okay, my phone is dying. But a negative aspect of that culture, so that's a good aspect. But the negative aspects could be, unfortunately, there is sadly a lot of sexism uh, in Islamic cultures around the world, and which is not doctrinated by the Quran. I will state is not, as I learned over the summer after knowing the dealer that sold me Timmy my motorized bike in the city of Toronto. But unfortunately, there is prevalence on toxic masculinity again, and basically men dominating over women in many regards, and also unfortunately there can be again homophobia and real high prevalence on being anti-transgenderism. You get my point. You get my point of like what I'm trying to say with any culture. There's good and there's bad to it. And this video clearly didn't do it justice enough because my phone is dying and I picked the worst time to do this, but I may do like a continued bit of this in my next exploring Ottawa video, which should be tomorrow because I'm planning on going downtown tomorrow, and I gotta prepare for that. But anyway, you get my point. Basically, just I feel that people really need to have more emphasis on looking at where the situations they've been raised in and the cultures they've grown up in, and actually critically thinking about what is good about said culture in traditional terms and what isn't. And this can also relate, it's kind of funny, well not funny, but it relates to, well I guess in an absurdist sense, yes it is funny, but it relates to, fuck it, I'll keep going for that, they want to think I'm weird, they'll think I'm weird. It relates to, there's also, I was talking about the commodification of children, basically by adults, for their own benefit. There's unfortunately, especially in a lot of consumerist capitalist world, high prevalence, well, especially now, there's a lot of commodifying of cultures, like there's a lot of commodifying of sacred cultural traditions, good and bad, just for the sake of selling a product. I mentioned this in like my the last before leaving the college video as well, about how so many companies basically take they take aspects of culture just to sell like a product, and then they push it to the side when it's no longer popular, basically. We see this in all regards. But anyway, I could list off a few more like cultures just to be fair about like again, this relates to cultures that I have practiced in as well, like that I'm a part of, like let's say LGBTQ plus culture. It's high prevalence on accepting yourself, expressing your sexuality, and expressing your romantic attitudes, being more fashion-wise, being more free with your clothing, being more loosely fitted, I guess. There's more high prevalence on like expressionism, like I'm saying, things of the sort, and more acceptance of all, like in terms of like our interests sexually in love life. But unfortunately, the negative side would be there's unfortunately can be more predatory behavior in certain regards of the culture. There's a bit more encroaching, like there's a bit more of, unfortunately, over pressuring at points for like expressing your sexuality and things like that, or being more overly being more like more pressure to be open with things. Um, is what I'm trying to say, which is sad. There's also unfortunately a heavier prevalence of, like, say, narcissism in certain regards in cultures relating to LGBTQ plus life, sadly. And again, not in all, not in every aspect. Emo music, emo culture, and goth culture, there's a lot of high prevalence on expressing your pain, and this is what I think is a good thing, like expressing like yourself physically through more darker clothes, more tightly constricted clothwear, and being more in touch with your like emotional state. Um, but sadly, it can also lead to there's a lot of over romanticization of mental illness and psychological illness in emo culture, sadly, and more praise for like self-harm methods in certain regards. So like you get the point of what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that it's good and bad to culture. I think more people, though, instead of just accepting every aspect of their culture or others, they need to look at and examine it and understand like what is beneficial, what is problematic. And obviously, I think in many regards, in most of what I'm listing here, they should still have the right to believe and act out these things in the culture, like just legally, whether or not it is like more detrimental to themselves or others in certain regards, as I just said, as I've talked about. But it's just, you get the point of what I'm trying to say. Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about with this. I'm cold. I'm really cold. Um, oh yes, and before I sign up, how this also, with pros and cons of culture, it relates to how a lot of societal stigma towards certain cultures leads to internalized feelings of, well, problematic internalized assumptions of yourself and your people group and demographic, and it also basically it it leads to well, more histrionic behaviors in the regard. You get what I mean. I'll do more videos relating to that. Like this, this was a horrible idea. This was a really bad idea. What I did tonight. Um, I'm going to get back to where I'm situated for the night. Yep, my phone died. As usual, it seems with some of these videos. It's basically just becoming. It's becoming a theme of this channel. Yes, and I still have the mask on. To be more specific, I put it back on because fuck you, I can. Yep, got back to where I'm situated, had a very hot shower because I was freezing cold, ate that slice of pie, and yeah. In conclusion, stop using children as a commodity for your own self-gain entirely, please. Stop with the encroaching and demeaning belief that children are unintelligent by nature, but yet they are also some beautiful, beautiful essence to be desired, like for in terms of physical appearance, in terms of age. And yeah, critically think about your society and the culture that you're in, acknowledge the good and practice the actual beneficial aspects of said culture, and denounce or try and improve the more detrimental and problematic elements of a culture. Yeah, I'm just gonna chill here now. Bye.